by show of hands, how many of you, let's have a moment of honesty here, how many of you by show of hands are into zombie shows? Just go ahead and put your hand up, own it. I won't judge you, I promise. In fact, my hand is up. Your neighbor might judge you, but I won't judge you. It seems like zombies are definitely the horror genre of choice these days. Here's one little statistical piece of proof. More than twice as many people watch the opening season of The Walking Dead as watch the final season of Mad Men, which is kind of like a zombie show in its own way, in my opinion. But I read a great article in the New York Times recently by one of my favorite social commentators, a guy named Chuck Klosterman, who suggested that the reason that zombie shows appeal to so many of us is because sort of subconsciously they correlate with how we feel in our day-to-day lives. Seemingly endless onslaught by mindless emails and advertisements and pop-up ads and tweets and voicemails that you have to eliminate one by one or else be consumed by them. You know what I'm talking about? You open up your email on Monday morning and there are 68 emails just kind of droning towards you, and you got to start shooting each of them with the delete button one by one. The good news, Klosterman says, is that by now we're all pretty prepared for the zombie apocalypse. If you awake from a coma and you don't immediately see a member of the hospital staff, you should assume that a zombie takeover has transpired during your incapacitation. Do not let zombies spit on you. If you knock one down, make sure that you pump a second bullet into its brainstem to make sure that it's dead. Zombies are basically moving bodies without souls. Zombies are bodies that mimic the actions of being alive, but they are not, in fact, alive. I want to use that image over the next 3 weeks to explain a concept that we're going to call phantom faith. Having phantom faith means that you go through the motions of Christianity, but you do so without the soul. And by that, I don't mean that you're an out-and-out hypocrite, just that there are certain core things about the Christian faith that you don't quite get yet, and so you end up mimicking the motions of Christianity, but there's something missing in your relationship with God, and maybe you know that. There's a joy that you lack, there's a confidence that you lack. So I'm going to use this series to identify 3 concepts that a lot of sincere people miss and cause them to live this way without the soul of Christianity. And by that, I don't just mean newbies to Christianity. Sometimes these people that I'm going to describe have been in church for years and they've still never quite grasped these things that we're going to talk about. If you're not a Christian, I'm going to explain some of the things that make what Jesus taught absolutely distinctive from every other religion in the world. Sometimes people that are like what I'm going to describe are people that are trying to get back into church. We have a lot of people in this church that have gone through some life event. They got divorced or maybe they had a baby or something, and they're just like, I got to get back in church. These are the concepts that they seem to stumble over. In fact, this message series came from me having conversations one-on-one with, I just felt like all these, and we were always talking about the same things. And I was like, I got to quit talking about these one-on-one, and I just need to do a series on them. So here we are. You can do that. Romans chapter 4, it concerns how you know for sure that you belong to God, or why you think it is that you are going to go to heaven. Let me ask it this way. If you were to die today and God were to say to you, why should I let you into heaven? What would your response be? And I know that sounds like a cliche question. If you grew up in the South, you grew up in the church, I feel like that's, Billy Graham, I think, made that question famous. If you died tonight, do you know? And Christians, we always assume you're going to die at night. Nobody knows why, but whatever. It's a cliche question, but it's still a good one. Why do you think that God's going to let you into heaven? You say, JD, I'm not even sure that there is a heaven. Okay, if you suppose there is a heaven, then what is the criteria for who gets in and who doesn't? And are you sure that you will be one of the ones who gets in? I have talked with you before about my own struggle with this question for many years when I was in high school and also in college, just not being able to know for sure and really wanting to know. Told you that if there were a Guinness Book of World Records for how many times somebody could say the sinner's prayer, I know that I would hold that world record because it was like every single service, I want to make sure that I'd ask Jesus into my heart the right way. That's how my church always talked about it. The ones who go to heaven are those who have accepted Christ. The ones who go to hell are those that haven't. I'm like, well, I got to make sure I have. And so I'd pray, but every time I'd be like, was I sorry enough for my sin? Did I understand enough? Did my life change enough as a result? Maybe not. I better do it again. And then in my church, we were the kind of church where you walk forward if you raised your hand, and so I don't want to invalidate the prayer by not going forward. So it was like a space of 3 years, y'all, that I walked forward. It felt like every single week. It was embarrassing. My dad was like, "You got to cut that out, son. You got to get over this." I've told you I had my own locker in the baptismal changing area because I just was that frequent, and because I got baptized 4 times during that season. I don't know if that's like your struggle. Most people, if you ask them, why do you think God will let you into heaven? They feel like it has something to do with their behavior. If you're good enough, if you're sincere enough as a Christian, if you believe enough, if you go to church enough, if you give enough. People from other religions, by the way, use the same criteria. They just switch out some of the specifics. Instead of going to church, it's going to mosque or synagogue or temple or something like that. It's like we are always trying to make a deal with God. God, there's if I do this many times, or I am good enough, then I expect you to give me heaven. Now, we do that a lot in our lives, don't we? Make deals with God. I would say, if you think about it, you probably make a lot of deals with God, or try to. You're out really late, you're a high school student, and you say, "Lord, if you will just let my parents be asleep when I get home, I promise I'll start going to church for like a solid month. I'll go to Sunday school. I'll teach Sunday school if you will let my parents just be asleep when I get home." Have you ever done something like that? God, give me this job, and I'll start to be generous. God, let her say yes to going out with me, and I will start reading my Bible. In fact, just so we're honest with each other, raise your hand if you've ever made a deal with God. Just say, raise it, go ahead and put it out, all campuses. If your hand is not up, you are a liar, okay? You really are. We make, it's just kind of what we do. It's how we think God works. I made one when I was freshman year of high school, before I became a Christian. It was on the soccer team, and I wasn't that good, and it was 1-1, and it was like 3 minutes left in the game, and I was like, "Lord, if you will let me score the final goal, I will stop cussing," because I knew the cheerleaders were watching, and I was like, "Just let me score." And it was like 20 seconds later, it was total freak. I scored the goal. I think I cussed at the moment when I made the goal, but it was you make deals with God, and you think like, "Oh, God in heaven's like, oh, you won't cuss. Oh, thank you." Like, I got to get in on that action. Tell me what do I do? How can I refuse? Well, we think of going to heaven like a deal that we make with God. We give God obedience, and God rewards us with heaven. But here's what the Apostle Paul says. What does Scripture say? Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. Abraham was about 90 years old, and God told him that he was going to have a son. And Abraham had never had any children. He evidently was infertile, and so God says, "You're going to have a son." And against all logic, against all evidence, against all hope, Abraham said, "Well, I believe it." And God saw his faith in God's promise, and God credited it to him as righteousness. Verse 5, to the one who does not work, you see, as an illustration with Abraham, but trusts God instead, who justifies the ungodly, their faith is credited as righteousness. I had a seminary professor who said that this is the most important verse in the Bible. I'm inclined to agree with him. He said, and it all hinges around this one word here. If you understand this one word, then you understand the gospel. If you don't understand this word, you don't understand the gospel. The word credited. It is the Greek word logizomai, and it is an accounting term, and it means to count one thing as if it were another thing. That's literally what it means. In fact, maybe it is easiest for me to explain it to you by telling you first what it does not mean. What that word does not mean is that Abraham's faith actually made him act righteously from that point onward. Here's how we know that. Immediately after Abraham believes God in Genesis 15, in the very next chapter, he doubts God and thinks that God can't really keep his promise, and so he sleeps with his house servant, Hagar, to try to have a son through her. It was an immoral act.